It's Collectively Crumb, where we look at the books and physical media that delivers the Crummy-verse to our hungry, hungry eyeballs. Today we're taking it way back to Robert Crumb's very first published book from 1967. And let's define what we mean by that, Crumb Bums, because we're not simply talking about publications. Because when today's book came out, Crumb's strips and drawings were already regularly appearing in Cavalier, The East Village Other, and Yarrowstocks. Yarrowstocks? One of these days we'll get to the bottom of that. And of course, he'd been published in Harvey Kurtzman's Help magazine as early as 1965. But these all fall under the category of periodicals. And what we're talking about when I say first published book includes comic books and, well, books, distributed by real publishers in significant quantities. So that doesn't include independently published fanzines like Foo, which Robert and Charles self-published in 1958. And while I guess you could make an argument for The Road to Success, a booklet that was published by Topps Gum in 1965 in order to market their gift certificate promotion to retailers, I think that kind of internal corporate schlock and propaganda is something categorically different than books or magazines. And the Crumb Compendium agrees, filing it under miscellany. No, Crumb Bums. Today we're talking about The Sad Book, published by American Greetings in 1967, which is a year before Zap #1 hit the streets. And I think we better have a little background history lesson before we jump into it. In October 1962, at the age of 19, Crumb moved from his parents' house in Dover, Delaware, to live with his buddy Marty Pauls in Cleveland, Ohio. He was quickly hired full-time at the American Greetings Corporation on the strength of his sketchbooks. He earned $60 a week, which is a little over $600 a week today with inflation. He languished in the color separation department for about 6 months, and was considering quitting when he got promoted to the highbrow cards department. Highbrows were tall, and as Crumb calls them, hip for the period, greeting cards. And Robert's boss there was Tom Wilson, who would go on to create the saccharine cartoon character, Ziggy.
That irreverence, that wit, I'd recognize it anywhere. It's a Ziggy.
Wilson was encouraging of Crumb's work, but constantly telling him to make it cuter and less grotesque, in order to appeal to the mostly female greeting card customer base. Crumb's work did get cuter during this period, and he also developed his vertical hatching technique that you see in his early Fritz the Cat comics, his work for Help, and even in his early hippie comics. In 1997, of this cute style, he said, "The Highbrow Studio taught me how to draw cute. I found it hard to shake that formula. Maybe, after 25 years, I've sifted that cuteness out of my art to some extent." Anyway, Crumb described the work as easy. He got a raise and was able to travel, working remotely through the mail. And he even produced several strips for the American Greetings Corp newsletter called Roberta Smith, Office Girl, based on what else but a chubby girl he had a crush on. But he hated working there, leaving and returning multiple times, growing increasingly alienated from corporate culture and the dreary 9-to-5 alcoholic working schmuck lifestyle. And, the LSD didn't help. And it was during his last 8-month stint at American Greetings in 1966 that he produced his first book, The Sad Book, by Robert Crumb and John P. Gibbons. Who's John Gibbons? Asked nobody ever. Well, except maybe in relation to this book and maybe the weirdos who specifically collect highbrow greeting cards. They're out there. But we do actually know a bit about him because Robert made this amazing biographical comic resume for Gibbons in 1964, which we can see in Odds and Ends from 2001. And I think we should look at this because Gibbons is otherwise unknown and perhaps deserves some more attention than he gets. A resume of the life of John P. Gibbons, written by John P. Gibbons, drawn by Robert Crumb. Born September 2nd, 1933. Education: attended St. Jerome's Grade School in Cleveland. Attended Cathedral Latin High School for 1 year. Attended St. Ignatius High School for 1 year. Attended Collingwood High for 1 year. And finally, graduated from Withrow High School in Cincinnati. College: Butler University, Indianapolis, Indiana. Military service: entered U.S. Army in 1956. Look, John, here come some of your Army buddies. Combat experience: Columbus, Georgia. Damn northern scum! Get out of this town, Yankees! Received honorable discharge and served 6 years in reserves. Brow, bow, pow, pow! Business experience: after working for a number of commercial radio stations as announcer, writer, engineer, etc., I decided to become strictly a writer, and finally found myself in the highbrow studio of American Greetings Corporation, a newly formed group of writers and artists devoted to bringing fresh, original, and truly funny material to the greeting card business. After 6 years, I've done all I can for the studio. It must now stand or fall on its own merits. Try as they may, the company officials cannot persuade me to stay. Even huge raises in pay cannot dissuade me from my decision to leave American Greetings. I am very interested in working for you, but I must warn you that I am being considered for a big railroad job, a key post in one of the larger advertising agencies, a position with a major airline, a top-flight job in communications, and an executive opening in a fast-rising young organization. I'll hold them off as long as I can, pending hearing from you. And the notes say these are pages 1, 2, and 3, so presumably there's a fourth page, which I imagine must have had his contact information and John's other practical resume stuff. And in R. Crumb's dream diary, Robert describes John Gibbons thusly. John Gibbons, card writer in the highbrow department. A very funny man, natural-born comedian. Died of cancer around age 50. Anyway, that's the John P. Gibbons portion of the review for all the Gibbons goobers out there. Shout yourselves out in the chat. So now let's crack this baby open. I'm not going to do a full read-through in this video, but I did release one in my new non-Crumb specific series, Grown Up Read Along in the Nostril Zone. So you can check that out in the show description if you want a proper page-by-page reading. The copyright is down here. It says American Greetings Corp, Cleveland, 1967, and it's written in Roman numerals. The Complete Crumb Volume 4 reprints the sad book in its entirety, which means it's canonical. And the table of contents here lists it as Spring 1966, so I assume that's the year it was made, because that's kind of how the Complete Crumb series is designed. This is the first printing, and you can tell from the green color. There's a second printing with a purple border, although sometimes it looks blue in photos. It's actually the nicer cover of the two, with its Cooper-esque font, and you can tell it's the second printing as well because the back has the Zonk imprint, whereas the first edition has highbrow funny books on the back. Fogel's 2015 Underground Price and Grading Guide lists its worth as $200 for a fine copy and up to $400 for near mint. Heritage Auctions sold a better-than-fine copy for about $380 in 2017. So, as usual, Fogel's is pretty accurate. Not to brag, but I got my copy, which is at least in acceptable condition, for $20 plus shipping. eBay and other sites are currently listing copies in worse condition for up to $400, but I don't think any are actually selling at that price. I don't know, prove me wrong. These American Greetings funny books, they're kind of like souped up greeting cards. You know, they're cheap and ephemeral. You might not be able to see it on the camera, but there's discoloration on the inside where the board is just covered by the end pages. The boards must be a little acidic. It's also got a space to write in a to and from like a greeting card, Mine is dedicated to Judy from Jim. Sorry, Jim, she got rid of it. And the book itself is a collection of pathetic people in sad and often ironic situations, written by Gibbons and illustrated by Crumb, like this one. Harriet Velhood wanted to be a belly dancer, but she had varicose veins in her stomach. It's done in a kind of hybrid of the schmaltzy cute commercial style he used on most of his American Greetings work, and the more revolutionary style of Zap Comics and onward. In a way, it's quite interesting to see. Like here, these boys laughing at mean old Mrs. Mednick, who after 35 years smiled at some children only to have her teeth fall out in the snow. They look a bit like the kids in Just Us Kids from Zap Comics #1. But it kinda doesn't satisfy the itch for either style, and I think the colors are a little too saturated. I like this one. Maynard gave up everything for his music, but he couldn't play very well. I like how the music notes are just kind of slumping out impotently on the floor. And this note down here says, "Maynard, come home, your loving wife." I wonder if that's a reference to the Mad Chicken Fat, "Mother, come home, we've found your lost issue of Mad." Mad would have variations of this gag in the 1950s in its early comic book form. But, both Mad and the Sad Book might be referencing something from the 50s that I just don't know about. This one's really depressing. J.P. Magnapane, son of an insignificant berry picker from Gravel Dump, Ohio, grew up to be a total failure and an incurable alcoholic. Jesus Christ, it's bleak. This guy in the red truck back here, he reminds me a bit of old Uncle Uh-Oh and his garbage truck from Zap #0, which is even more obvious in this American Greetings card from a couple years earlier. So, his American Greetings work was kind of setting the stage for the hippie comics he'd be making later in the 60s. This one here, Mr. Morgan was a big executive with 25 phones on his desk, but nobody ever called him. I actually counted, and there does seem to be 25 phones on his desk. And I'd love to insert the Count Von Count saying, 25 phones, ah. But I don't think he ever counted that high on the show. I like the weather vane on the barn. Okay, Gladys Goink here, who was just ugly as hell, and she didn't have any money either. Even back then, when Crumb would draw an ugly woman, she's invariably skinny with a bony ass. I find Boris, the good vampire with bad teeth, funny, but it wouldn't be a problem if my kid had drawn this, because he always draws vampires drinking blood from a cup. Whoa. Now this is a weird one. The poor old man who saved up all week to buy a cup of porridge, and there was a hair in it. Like, what's going on with these body proportions here? His feet are like beavers, and he has the swollen hands of King Charles. That description was for my fellow hosers, by the way. I do like where the 9th Street Mission has engraved beside the door, "Welcome to all wayfarers, blah blah, etc." And then we get the sappy punchline of the book. But of all the sad, sad things in this sad, sad world, the saddest of all is me without you. And down here you have this little frog saying, "'Tis sad." And you may recognize him as the same kind of froggy as Augie from the Yum Yum book, also known as Augie and the Beanstalk, which is a book Crumb drew and colored in his sketchbook in 1963 when he was just 19. He gifted it to his first wife Dana, and it was eventually published by Scrimshaw in 1975. This is the first edition, and you can see Dana Crumb Associates owns the copyright, which is probably why it doesn't appear in the complete Crumb. Scrimshaw still publishes Crumb stuff, and Dan Nadel's new biography of Crumb is set to release in a couple of months. So hopefully, they'll do the right thing and send me a review copy. I'm talking to you, Paul Samuelson of Scrimshaw. But I digress. Crumb drew a lot of these froggies up until the mid-60s, when they disappeared as he transitioned into the acid-inspired hippie comics of the late 1960s. And the last one that he drew was possibly on this ad for the Yum Yum book in 1975, and this panel highlights how Crumb felt about the whole thing. You know, casually embarrassed. Anyway, we'll do a deep dive into the Yum Yum book at some point, but in the meantime, I need to rate the Sad book. And it's difficult because there isn't a whole lot here. You know, it's not a good sampling of Crumb's work, not even of his work for American Greetings Corp. And you don't need it, because as I mentioned, the whole thing, along with a sampling of American Greetings cards, are reprinted in the Complete Crumb Volume 4, which you do need. I mean, even if you were only going to own 2 or 3 volumes of the Complete Crumb series, this has got to be one of them. And so, I give the Sad book 2 out of a possible 5 big asses. Which, I mean, feels wrong to give anything by Crumb that low of a rating. But, frankly, I would have given it a lower rating if not for its historical significance, which it definitely has in spades. And, you know, if you're a collector of 60s and 70s kitsch or something like that, maybe you'd give this a higher rating. But even by that measure, I don't think this book particularly stands out. As a Crumb collector, though, it's neat to see. And I hope you enjoyed seeing it, Crumbums. Because that's all the time we have for today. If you like this program, please remember to hit like, hit subscribe, be a ding-dong daddy, and ding that bell. I've been your host, Kyle Bridget. You can find my links in the show description, and you can help support my work and all of the programs in the Nostril Zone by joining the channel here or signing up on Patreon, where you'll get access to all of my uncensored videos. As well, you'll be thanked at the end of the program, which is now. Collectably Crumb will be back as weekly as possible to look at more of the books and physical media that deliver the Crummy-verse to our hungry, hungry eyeballs. Thanks again, and keep it crazy cool.
I want a horse and plow, chickens too, just one cow with a wistful moo. I can hardly wait till I see the great open spaces. My loving friends will not be there. I'm so sick of their damn fool faces. Because I'm world weary, tired of all these jumping jacks. I want to get right back to nature and relax.